Folks, you have got to see what's about to go down on Mount Sinai. Here's a recent article from Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development. Returning to Mount Sinai, a prophetic call for climate justice and ceremony of repentance. Sunday, November 13th, 2022, Mount Sinai, in parallel with the COP27 United Nations Climate Conference. Between November 6th and 18th, 2022, the United Nations Climate Conference, COP27, will take place on the Sinai Peninsula in Sharm El Sheikh, Egypt. On Sunday, November 13th, religious leaders will return on Mount Sinai, a mountain whose memory and meaning loom large as a place of revelation in the collective consciousness of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and others. As an ancient sacred space, it was a site of prophetic experience in receiving God's message for the prophets Moses and Elijah in all three Abrahamic traditions, and the prophet Muhammad in the Muslim tradition. It therefore serves as an ideal location to remind humanity of our sacred responsibility to care for God's creation. The event, its preparation, and the stages of its unfolding will be filmed and made part of a documentary. Social media will be employed heavily to disseminate the event in real time. The materials produced by religious leaders participating in the event will be converted into study materials that will serve the religious communities and the community of climate activists in special seminars in ongoing teaching situations. Invite media to cover religious leaders' advocacy in combating climate change. Promote a coalition of religious leaders to work together for climate action. Generate new faith-inspired climate education materials for broad use. The project partners will bring together premier religious leaders from the world's major religions to gather upon Mount Sinai to engage in a first ever climate repentance ceremony and to put forth a prophetic interreligious call to action. Climate justice, 10 universal commandments. You heard that correct, folks. They want to put forth a prophetic interreligious call to action, climate justice, 10 universal commandments. Folks, this is all about bringing all of the world religions together to worship the earth and join together for this whole climate change agenda. One world religion.
According to the Bible, Mount Sinai is the place where God revealed himself to the Israelites after rescuing them from Egyptian slavery. It's also the place where God gave Moses the 10 Commandments written on stone. However, 40 years before this story, God had also appeared to Moses on Mount Sinai, this time in the form of a burning bush that was not consumed by the flames. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. It was here on Mount Sinai that God gave Moses his commission to free the Israelites from Egyptian slavery. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 10, God says, "Come now therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." Finally, God told Moses that after he freed Israel from Egyptian bondage, he would bring them back to Mount Sinai, where they would serve him. And he said, "Certainly, I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee, that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God upon this mountain." Mount Sinai, therefore, is the Bible's symbol of transferal from bondage to human power to service and worship of the God of heaven. God gave more than just the 10 Commandments to Israel at Mount Sinai. He also told them to build the sanctuary and gave them numerous social, health, and civil regulations that shaped their spiritual, personal, social, and civil society for hundreds of years. This heaven-inspired vision was to guide and lead the Israelites into the promised land of Canaan. Furthermore, their prosperity and future as a nation was directly tied to their continued obedience to the Mount Sinai experience and to the 10 Commandments. So what would a new set of 10 commandments focused on climate justice look like? We don't have to guess. One of the organizers of this event has already published a suggested list. Here are the first 4 items on that list. Number 1, do not murder by allowing millions of people to suffer from the effects of extreme heat and cold, wildfires, rising sea levels, and supercharged storms. Number 2, do not steal by robbing nature of her ability to regenerate. Number 3, do not bear false witness by allowing distortions of truth and policy that lead to the sin of increased emissions. Number 4, keep the Sabbath through a global weekly non-carbon day of rest. All 4 of these commandments, do not murder, do not steal, do not bear false witness, and remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, are found in the original 10 commandments given by God on Mount Sinai. And the 4th commandment, the one about keeping the Sabbath holy, is the longest of all the 10 commandments. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested on the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Notice 2 things. First, God's Sabbath day of rest is the 7th day of each week, what we today refer to as Saturday. Second, the 7th day Sabbath is a memorial of God's completed work of creation and a sign of His authority as Creator. Note what Genesis chapter 2 says. And on the 7th day God ended His work which He had made, and He rested on the 7th day from all His work which He had made. And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because that in it He had rested from all His work which God created and made. This perfect earth had a perfect climate and was masterfully designed for complete and eternal sustainability. And the 7th day Sabbath was the sign or symbol of God's power and authority to rule over this perfectly created earth. So are we free today to choose any day as a Sabbath of rest? The Bible's 4th commandment says very clearly, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. The Bible says that the Sabbath is also a sign or symbol of God's power to save people from sin. God says in Ezekiel chapter 20, moreover also I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord that sanctify them. So the Sabbath rest is also a symbol of forgiveness and freedom from the power of sin. The book of Revelation reveals that the issue of worship and rest will be a big one in the future. In Revelation chapter 14, an angel from heaven warns, if any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. According to the Bible, the mark of the beast will be enforced on all people. Those that refuse to comply with this mark will be economically restricted and then, eventually, faced with death. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Don't miss the connection between the mark of the beast, worship, and rest. In Revelation chapter 14, verse 11, they have no rest day nor night who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. However, in Revelation chapter 14, verse 13, those who refuse the mark of the beast rest from their labors. The 7th day Sabbath clearly is an issue of worship and also of rest. Is it possible that the mark of the beast is connected with the issue of true and false Sabbath rest? Consider Revelation 15, verse 2, which describes those that have victory over 4 things: the beast, the image of the beast, the number of his name, and the mark of the beast. And I saw as it were a sea of glass mingled with fire, and them that had gotten the victory over the beast, and over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass, having the harps of God. Notice carefully what is going on in this verse. First, the beast power wants to be worshipped, and prophecy predicts that it eventually will receive worship from nearly all people on earth. Revelation chapter 13 says, "And all the world wondered after the beast, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world." This is an attack and counterfeit against God's first commandment, which says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." Second, the image of the beast is clearly an attack and counterfeit against the second commandment, which says, "Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image," Exodus 20, verse 4. The number of the beast's name, mentioned in Revelation 15, verse 2, is also a clear attack and counterfeit against the third commandment, which says, "Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain," Exodus 20, verse 7. This leaves the mark of the beast, which logic compels us to conclude is an attack and counterfeit against God's fourth commandment and the seventh-day Sabbath. Just as God's original Sabbath rest on the seventh day of each week serves as a memorial of his work of creation, the mark of the beast will center around a counterfeit Sabbath rest on another day of the week that celebrates humanity's effort to save creation. It shouldn't be surprising then that the mark of the beast and its counterfeit day of rest comes tied to a modern-day climate change or climate preservation movement. Pope Francis said as much in his 2015 encyclical on climate change, Laudato Si. At the conclusion of this encyclical, the Pope presented Sunday sacredness as his solution for climate change, sustainability, and many of the world's other pressing issues. He wrote, "On Sunday, our participation in the Eucharist has special importance. Sunday, like the Jewish Sabbath, is meant to be a day which heals our relationships with God, with ourselves, with others, and with the world. Sunday is the day of the resurrection, the first day of the new creation, whose first fruits are the Lord's risen humanity, the pledge of the final transfiguration of all created reality." History reveals that Sunday sacredness has nothing to do with the Bible and the Ten Commandments. The Roman Catholic Church is clear about this. The Church is above the Bible, and this transference of Sabbath observance from Saturday to Sunday is proof positive of that fact. Deny the authority of the Church, and you have no adequate or reasonable explanation or justification for the substitution of Sunday for Saturday. Rather than having a divine origin, Sunday sacredness and Sunday rest originated in the 4th century when the Roman Emperor Constantine attempted to unite Christianity and pagan sun-worshiping cults within his sprawling empire. His Sunday rest law in AD 321 marked the official beginning of legislated Sunday sacredness. Constantine's law said, "On the venerable day of the sun, let the magistrates and people residing in cities rest, and let all workshops be closed." Constantine's Sunday law marked a turning point in the history, culture, and civilization of Europe. It's hard to imagine that those who are pushing for legislated Sunday rest today aren't also hoping for a similar societal transformation. In just a few weeks, religious leaders from many world faiths will convene on Mount Sinai in pursuit of a spiritual vision, and perhaps even a religious law that will unite the world. They will also be looking for a miracle, like the burning bush Moses witnessed so many centuries ago. The rise of the ancient Egyptian dynasties coincided with the rise of the worship of Ra, the sun god. A new era of renewables must shine out of Egypt this November, or our civilization, like that of the ancient Egyptians, will be doomed. When religious leaders of all faiths ascend Mount Sinai on November 13, during COP27, they will seek to touch the heart of humanity and deliver a prophetic message. Sinai power worked once before to fuel moral revolutions. It must work again. To keep global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of this century, we need a miracle. The book of Revelation says that this search for miracles will not be in vain. "And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. Unfortunately, many of the miracles performed on earth in the near future will be deceptive. They will lead people into false worship and eventually into accepting the mark of the beast. The events this fall on Mount Sinai may be done with good intentions by good people looking for good answers to bad problems. However, Bible prophecy is clear. The mark of the beast crisis is coming, and eventually every person living on earth will have to make a decision. Will they recognize God as their creator and worship Him on His seventh-day Sabbath? Or will they obey the laws of men and recognize human authority by observing another day as a sacred day of rest?
First, before that, we have the Cry for Peace coming up October 23rd through the 25th. And why does it look like a Colosseum? Let's find out, because this is happening in Rome. They're talking about this, a prayer service for peace at Rome's Colosseum, where Christians were martyred. The Vatican confirmed yesterday, Tuesday, that the Pope Francis will join other religious leaders at a prayer service. This is an interreligious prayer summit for 3 days, and representatives of the world's major religions will take part in the prayer service and conference, talking about peace and everything they're doing. And even the service there, the interreligious prayer service from 4:30 to 6 p.m. at the Colosseum, the famous monument is believed by some historians to be a site of early Christian martyrdom. Now, why would they talk about Christian martyrdom except for Revelation 6 seal that's coming up? When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then a white robe was given to each of them, and it was said to them that they should rest a little while longer until both the number of their fellow servants and their brethren would be killed as they were was completed. For our sin of omission, the 10+1 climate commandments. You know, this is just an opinion, but one of them is to keep the Sabbath. Emissions are down 30% over the Sabbath every week in Israel, and are almost zeroed out on Yom Kippur, the most Jewish high holy day of the year. A global weekly non-carbon day could reduce emissions of the world by 1/7, and can be observed by different faith communities on different days. How's that going to work?
Moses and the Israelites traveled through the wilderness. They came to a mountain called Mount Sinai. Moses and his minister Joshua were now summoned to meet with God. And as they were to be some time absent, the leader appointed Aaron and Hur, assisted by the elders, to act in his stead. And Moses went up into the mount, and a cloud covered the mount. And the glory of the Lord abode upon Mount Sinai. For 6 days the cloud covered the mountain as a token of God's special presence, yet there was no revelation of himself or communication of his will. During this time, Moses remained in waiting for a summons to the presence chamber of the Most High. He had been directed, Come up to me into the mount, and be there, and though his patience and obedience were tested, he did not grow weary of watching, or forsake his post. This period of waiting was to him a time of preparation, of close self-examination. Even this favored servant of God could not at once approach his presence and endure the exhibitions of his glory. 6 days must be employed in devoting himself to God by searching of heart, meditation, and prayer before he could be prepared for direct communication with his Maker. Upon the 7th day, which was the Sabbath, Moses was called up into the cloud. The thick cloud opened in the sight of all Israel, and the glory of the Lord broke forth like devouring fire. And Moses went into the midst of the cloud, and gat him up into the mount, and Moses was in the mount 40 days and 40 nights. The 40 days tarry in the mount did not include the 6 days of preparation. During the 6 days Joshua was with Moses, and together they ate of the manna and drank of the brook that descended out of the mount. But Joshua did not enter with Moses into the cloud. He remained without, and continued to eat and drink daily while awaiting the return of Moses, but Moses fasted during the entire 40 days. Patriarchs and Prophets, page 313. At this point, Moses received the 10 Commandments from the Lord. While Moses was on Mount Sinai, the people of Israel got tired of waiting for him. They told Aaron to make statues for them to worship like they had in Egypt. Aaron gathered all their gold and made a statue of a calf. The Israelites worshipped the golden calf and offered sacrifices. They said the golden calf, not the Lord, freed them from Egypt. Could it be that God is going to give the world another 10 commands? And who would be the new Moses of our generation if God were to do so? As you have probably answered it correctly, God will not give any new 10 commandments, because he has made his stand very clear in Malachi 3 verse 6 that he changes not. Jesus too affirmed it when he stated in Luke 16 verse 17 that it is easier for heaven and earth to pass away than for one title of the law to fail. Please remember that at Mount Sinai, you could either side with God by obeying his 10 commandments or with Satan by worshipping the golden calf. Since the 10 universal commandments cannot be from God, the devil must be behind it, just as he put pressure on Aaron to make the golden calf through the Israelites. We must be cautious about who we obey, because there are only 2 classes and 2 masters, one cannot worship both. Matthew 6 verse 24, no one can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be devoted to one and despise the other. So when they say 10 commandments, they are referring to the Pope's 10 commandments on climate change.
So when Moses went up to the mountain, he went up to receive the 10 commandments, but he did not go up and come back down on the same day, but he went up to the mountain for 40 days. Exodus 34:28, and he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He did neither eat bread nor drink water, and he wrote upon the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 commandments. Now, when did the 10 commandments come? After the end of the 40 days. The final connection to all of this has to be the 40 days. So if you go from November 13th, 40 days, it brings you right to midweek Hanukkah and the winter solstice. Midweek Hanukkah and the winter solstice. December 22nd is exactly midweek Hanukkah, and it's the end of the 40 days of Mount Sinai and all the world leaders coming with the new 10 universal commandments.
They want us to worship Mother Earth and to put forth a prophetic interreligious call to action, climate justice, 10 universal commandments. Oh, the audacity. So they're actually going to go up on God's holy mountain, where God told the Israelites, you can't even touch the foot of the mountain. He says here in Exodus 19, he says, put limits for the people around the mountain and tell them, be careful that you do not go up the mountain or touch the foot of it. Whoever touches the mountain will surely be put to death. And yet these people not only are going to touch the mountain, they're going to climb the mountain. And then instead of receiving 10 commandments from God, they're going to give their own 10 commandments. Can you believe the audacity of these people? It's unbelievable. In Deuteronomy 4, do not add to what I command, and do not subtract from it, but keep the commands of the Lord your God that I give you. Okay, this is Deuteronomy 4, and in the very next chapter, what are the commands he gives them? The 10 commandments. That's the commandments he gives them. He says, don't add to it, and don't take away from it. Don't subtract from it. Okay? So what are they doing? They're taking God's 10 commandments, and they're twisting it, and trying to create their own 10 commandments instead. The Pope did the same thing. You know, here's the guy, P-O-P-E, supposed to be representing God, Jesus, supposed to be bringing you back to the Bible. And what is he doing? He's promoting 10 commandments on climate change. So he's actually changing the 10 commandments to focus on worshiping the earth rather than worshiping God. Romans 1 talked about this. It says, they exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. And that is what they're trying to get back to. They're trying to get back to pagan worship, worshiping the earth rather than worshiping God. So his Laudato Si does the same thing. Things like adoption of a simple lifestyle, what they really mean is you'll own nothing and love it. This is all part of the globalist agenda to try to get you back to serfdom, get you back to bowing down to them and bowing down to the earth and worshiping the earth rather than worshiping the God who made it. So this has nothing to do with your walk with God, has nothing to do with you repenting and turning to a life of Christianity. This has everything to do with worshiping Mother Earth, right? But they want to take you off of God and get you back to worshiping the created things rather than the Creator. And so they're changing their commandments to voting climate change. And they say don't murder, but they're really saying, we want to take care of the earth. Don't steal from Mother Earth. Don't bear false witness. So they're basically taking all the 10 commandments and they're perverting them to represent what you do for the earth. And again, like I said, when you become a Christian and you become someone who follows God, of course you're going to take care of God's creation. That goes hand in hand with it. But first and foremost, God is here to save us. Jesus didn't come to save the earth. He came to seek and save the lost, to save souls. All right, that's what he's here to do. And yes, of course, we're going to take care of our home. This is the logo they have for this year's conference. Well, they tell you this represents Aten, who is the sun god, worshipped during the era of Pharaoh, King Akhenaten. Aten is this guy of the sun god. And so that's what they want to get back to worshiping here. The hands coming down of Aten, the sun god that they worship. Akhenaten was the pharaoh who promoted that. He wanted everyone to call him the sun god. And there's lots of depictions of that as you see the little hand raised coming down from the sun there. And there's Aten, the one god, as they call it there. It actually says it here. If you look in the upper corner, it says Aten, one god. See? So that is what they're trying to get everybody to get back to, is worshiping the created things rather than the creator. Now, it's interesting. Sunday is the day that they're doing this. Well, there's a reason it's called Sunday. It's because of that. That's actually where the name originally came from, was from the sun god. In fact, Constantine instituted everyone to worship God on Sunday back in 321. Now, just to clarify that, Jesus was raised from the grave on Sunday, okay? And it is the Lord's Day. So he, in a sense, came and made that day whole, because they were worshiping on Sunday because they were worshiping the sun god, or worshiping the sun, rather than worshiping the Son of God, which is Jesus the Christ. So Jesus was actually born. He was born from the grave on Sunday. So he was raised on the third day, which is Sunday, the first day of the week. And just to show you, the disciples did come together on the first day of the week to break bread together and hear the message of God. So it is biblical to meet on Sunday. So in case you're concerned, like, oh no, I worship God on Sunday, is that a problem? It's not a problem. If you worship God on Sunday, you're honoring the Lord and so forth. But they are trying to switch it from Jesus and the Christ to actually be worshiping the Son. Now, as you can see, the place they've chosen, Sharm El Sheik, is a beautiful place. It is quite amazing. And you look across there, you can see the mountain. Almost looks like that's Mount Sinai across the way there. I don't believe it is. I think that's one of the islands before you get there, but it does look pretty amazing. This is actually the place where many believe the Israelites gathered before they crossed the Red Sea with Pharaoh. It's one of the places that is considered as that location. As you can see from this map, as you look up there, it's the Straits of Tiran there, you see. That is where, right above there, right north of Straits of Tiran, that is where Sharm El Sheik is, and that is where they will be doing their pagan rituals as they worship the sun god and worship the earth rather than worshiping the God who created them. And that is what they're trying to do. But oh, the audacity of them to go to the very place where God took them away from all those pagan rituals, where they took them out of Egypt, right? And out of and away from Akhenaten, and away from worshiping sun gods, and away from worshiping all the false gods, which is what the whole 10 plagues were all about, was to show you all the different gods and condemn those gods, from the frog god to the, making the Nile turn to blood, to to all the different plagues, the flies and everything that was all related to their false gods. And so the audacity of them to go to the very place where God led Moses and the Israelites out of Egypt, out and away from those false gods, and to go and defile that with their false god rituals is just unbelievable. I can't imagine what's going to happen to them when they attempt to do this. If you look at the bottom there, you see Sharm El Sheik. Okay, that is where they're going to be. That's the location they're going to be. So they're going to do that on Sunday specifically because they want to worship the sun god. That's what they're trying to switch it back from the Son of God, right, Jesus Christ, and trying to switch it back to the sun god. And they're actually going to Mount Sinai, of all places, that they would try to defile God in this way. So look at here. There's two possible locations. One is called Jabal Musa, which is Moses' mountain. And that is one possible location that they believe is the actual Mount Sinai. I zoom in on this just a touch there. That's called Jabal Musa, or the Moses Mountain. Musa from Moses. And that's one possible location. And then the other location is across the way. Now, some believe that the Israelites may have actually crossed here by the Straits of Tiran. It's a small little area where God could have parted the Red Sea there. There is another location further north that they also think it may have happened. But it's possible that they parted it there and that they went across, as shown, as depicted in this picture here, that they went across those straits. God parted the straits. They came across here to Mount Sinai. That is where they're going to go, and they're going to present as they say in their own writing, they're going to present their false 10 commandments, right? Their climate justice of 10 universal commandments, and they're going to present their own climate commandments on Aten's day as they worship the sun god, not God, but they worship the sun god. I mean, Elijah, this is what happened with the prophet Elijah, right? Elijah was with the prophets of Baal, and they were calling out to their false god to call fire down out of heaven, and then finally Elijah, they failed, of course, and finally Elijah steps up and he calls it down, even after pouring water all over the offering 3 times, and and then God instantly sends the fire down and burns up the offering. So I can only imagine when God wouldn't even let the Israelites touch this mountain when his presence was there. I can only imagine how God is going to feel about pagans going up there to defile the mountain. I mean, publicly, globally, all these world leaders who represent all these nations, and they have the audacity to go up to Mount Sinai and present 10 false commandments, really the devil's commandments, because they are perverting the commandments of God. And anytime the word of God is perverted, that's the devil's doing. The devil wants to pervert the word of God, and every time the word of God gets perverted, that's what you get. But it did say that this would happen in 2 Thessalonians 2. It says about the Antichrist, he will oppose and he will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he himself sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. So this is just the beginning, guys. This is the beginning of him setting himself in God's temple, so to speak, because Mount Sinai was really sort of the original temple for the Israelites before God created the tabernacle and they wandered in the wilderness. And then finally it was the temple there on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which we know he ultimately will set himself up there as well. So this is really just the beginning. This could be where the Antichrist gets introduced to the world. Could happen at this occasion on this mountain of all places. Oh, the audacity. I can't imagine what's going to happen then.
They are referring to the Pope's day of rest in his 10 Commandments, which is translated by Catholic News Service as, Sunday is for family. Revelation 13 verse 3 says, "And all the world wondered after the beast." His idea of making Sunday a day of rest to allow the environment to recover is now being accepted all over the world. One of the reasons why keeping the Lord's seventh-day Sabbath, which is Saturday, holy is because it's a way of demonstrating that God is your creator. Listen to this. The Sabbath is not introduced as a new institution but as having been founded at creation. It is to be remembered and observed as the memorial of the Creator's work. Pointing to God as the maker of the heavens and the earth, it distinguishes the true God from all false gods. All who keep the seventh day signify by this act that they are worshippers of Jehovah. Thus the Sabbath is the sign of man's allegiance to God as long as there are any upon the earth to serve him. The fourth commandment is the only one of all the 10 in which are found both the name and the title of the lawgiver. It is the only one that shows by whose authority the law is given. Thus it contains the seal of God, affixed to his law as evidence of its authenticity and binding force. Now let's talk about COP27, starting with the logo. The distinctive cultural identity of Egypt and Asian Egyptian worship are highlighted in the official logo of COP27. The sun is the logo's primary component. One of the most notable things about Africa. Some individuals hold the view that the sun's rising and setting are symbolic of the cycle of life from conception through death and rebirth. The Aten sun is the second component of the logo. It is centrally symbolized by the sun's rays, which have human hands at their ends. The next element in the logo is the horizon, which represents the ray of the sun and what we must receive from the sun in order to benefit the earth and people. The globe is the other component of the logo, which represents their goal of promoting sun worship throughout the world. The combination of the aforementioned elements leads to the emergence or the rise of paganism in these last days. Through COP27, world and religious leaders are promoting the image of the beast, which is the union of church and state. They are promoting pagan worship, which God's second commandment forbids. The COP27 adds fuel to the Sunday worship by law, which is the mark of the beast. The prophecy is coming true, and the Sunday law is getting closer every microsecond. Satan puts his interpretation upon events, and they think, as he would have them, that the calamities which fill the land are a result of Sunday breaking. Thinking to appease the wrath of God, These influential men make laws enforcing Sunday observance. 10 Manuscript Release page 239, 1899. Sunday law advocates do not realize what they are doing. The Sunday movement is now making its way in darkness. The leaders are concealing the true issue, and many who unite in the movement do not themselves see whither the undercurrent is tending. They are working in blindness. They do not see that if a Protestant government sacrifices the principles that have made them a free, independent nation, and through legislation brings into the Constitution principles that will propagate papal falsehood and papal delusion, they are plunging into the Roman horrors of the Dark Ages. Review in Herald Extra, December 11, 1888. Sooner or later, Sunday laws will be passed. Watch this video next and see the nation that will pass the Sunday law.
This is what I've been talking about, and I continue to talk about. It's Pope Francis's Laudato Si. It's the New World Order, half-baked horror story, and it'll be fully baked by this November, by November 13th. All of this is about is destroying life on planet Earth, is to get rid of all the fossil burning cars and get rid of all the cattle that are breathing their emissions that are destroying the ozone layer and everything that's destroying the ozone layer. So the kids are all gluing their hands to and throwing mashed potatoes over the masterpieces in different museums all over the world. All the way to Australia, they glue themselves to Porsche showrooms. They lay down in front of traffic because they've all been brainwashed into believing that everybody's going to be incinerated unless we kill off 2/3 of the planet, so we don't have so many people. It's overpopulated, and we're going to have to eat flour and insect burgers, and it's all going to be all one religion. And who's going to be at the head of the whole all one world religion? They're going to be on Mount Sinai, and that's Lucifer. That's the Antichrist. It's all the biblical projection. It's all been prophesied. That's what's so mind-blowing about this. It's been prophesied in the Bible. It's all coming together exactly according to the prophetic prophecies and the timeline and everything else, and the nation against nation. Everything that's going on today, Europe is breaking up into splinters. Yesterday, France and Germany are at each other. So it's just showing that this is all part of this globalist agenda. It's just designed to wipe out the working class. So you can't drive your cars anymore. You just like the Cultural Revolution in Mao's China. Remember, they're all riding bicycles. That's the plan. Haven't heard Pope Francis. Who's behind all of it is this gentleman, right? I've shown this the other day. On Sunday, our participation in the Eucharist has special importance. Sunday, like the Jewish Sabbath, is meant to be a day which heals our relationships with God, with ourselves, with others, and with the world. Sunday is the day of resurrection, the first day of the new creation. What's the new creation? That's the new world order, the new birth, the new sun arising, the plans for the new earth, whose first fruits are the Lord's risen humanity, the pledge of the final transfiguration of all created reality. Who's going to be born in this time? Isn't that the Antichrist? The Messiah, right? The Messiah is coming. It also proclaims man's eternal rest in God. In this way, Christian spirituality incorporates the value of relaxation and festivity. Gee, I thought that was pagan religions, relaxation and festivity. Boy, isn't this great? We tend to demean contemplative rest as something unproductive and unnecessary. But this is to do away with the very thing which is most important about work, its meaning. We are called to include in our work a dimension of receptivity and gratuity, which is quite different from mere inactivity. And we can sacrifice the bulls as well and dance around and revel in revelry and worship the earth and the earth mother and the earth goddess. It's panentheism, or it's pantheism. As Pope Francis makes perfectly clear here, the universe unfolds in God, who fills it completely. Hence, there is a mystical meaning to be found in a leaf, in a mountain trail, in a dewdrop, in a poor person's face. This is standard occult, or it's standard Hinduism, or it's standard Buddhism, or it's standard Eastern religion. The ideal is not only to pass from the exterior to the interior, to discover the action of God in the soul, but also to discover, where's Jesus Christ in all this? I don't see his name mentioned. Also to discover God in all things. St. Bonaventure, there's St. Bonaventure. We all worship St. Bonaventure. Teaches us, not Jesus, the teacher is St. Bonaventure, whoever he is, that contemplation deepens the more we feel. We're feeling it, aren't we? The working of God's grace within our hearts, and the better we learn to encounter God in creatures outside ourselves. Well, isn't that what God was talking about when he said not to be worshiping creatures outside ourselves? Not to be worshiping false idols, not to be worshiping Saint Bonaventure. I'm praying to Saint Anthony to find my, I lost my car keys. I better pray to Saint Anthony. Or is that Saint Christopher? I've got my Christopher medal, and I get so many plenary indulgences, so my time is reduced, and that I'm spending in purgatory. Where does all this come from? It's not in the Bible. Incidentally, it comes from this New Age religion. So that's the one world religion. This is big news that this big conference is showing up right at this particular time, and organized around what else but the climate change agenda. It's an economic agenda, and the economic agenda is being carried out by, guess who carries out economic agendas? Well, that would be the World Economic Forum, presided over by Klaus Schwab, and the European central banks, in coordination with the Federal Reserve Bank in Washington, are inflating this currency that we have, the dollar, that's going to crash. And it's not going to be worth anything, and there will have to be a great reset. Because why is the dollar being inflated? It's out of control. That's what I keep saying, is this is demonic people, and that's predicted as well. In the last days, you're going to have the fallen angels coming down to earth, and you're going to have Lucifer's kingdom rising. So all of this is the nightmare scenario we see around us. We call it mental illness, but mental illness is a form most often, in my observation of it, of people who are demon possessed. And nobody believes in demons these days. I mean, the Rolling Stones seem to. They've studied with Aleister Crowley, disciple Hollywood filmmaker Kenneth Anger, who's a 32nd degree, as he says himself, but I would imagine he's higher up than that. But he's modest, but he was certainly doing satanic initiation rites, and they're in his films, starred in with people like Marianne Faithfull, and there's Mick Jagger, and there's Bobby Beausoleil, the Manson murderer, who's just there. There's demonic. Tex Watson, the Manson murderer, talked about being demon possessed. There's a whole book about it. You think he's lying? I don't, considering his activities in two of the most horrific murders in American history that caught people's attention, just like Jack the Ripper did in London. It's all part of the same phenomena. I mean, if you can't see this, you're really blind. I'll tell you. This is like screaming at us. I can just imagine that. Well, there go the two needs the Ten Commandments when you have Pope Francis and company. I haven't heard Jesus mentioned. I haven't heard Pope Francis mentioned. But Laudato Si is the foundation document of, that's the climate change document of this climate justice, 10 universal commandments that we're all to obey. One of them is, you're not going to get to use your car anymore. You're not going to get to use heating in your house anymore. It's going to be limited. You're going to be put on a budget, and you're going to be put, that's what the beast system is, so-called, or I didn't coin the name. The beast system is the new digitized currency that's already been, and of course in a unilateral act signed into law by the dictator himself of the free world and commander-in-chief of all NATO forces, Joe Biden. But that's what's been signed into law, is this new digital currency that's going to be issued by the Federal Reserve, that everybody will have no possessions and be happy. To summarize Klaus Schwab's, it's nice that they put it in simple terms that people like you and me can understand. Have no possessions and be happy, and not use so much energy so we can save the planet for the rich and who are in yachts and jets and helicopters and have 15 vacation homes that, use as much energy as probably the whole state of, you name it. This is clearly the rule of the 1% under the personage of whoever is going to sit in the rebuilt temple. And you see the Lizard King, like Jim Morrison is the Lizard King, and you see Alan Moore worshiping a serpent, that he's on LSD and talks with this serpent, and he has all this wisdom that's passed to him, and he's Austin Osman Spare, who's the disciple of Aleister Crowley, who invented automatic art used by the surrealists, and there's this sex magic all through it, which is what Crowley's religion is. It's called black sex magic, and it's taken from tantric yoga, which are all these sexual practices that bring about states of ecstasy. It's a little bit different from Jesus Christ's religion. It's God destroys the temple because it's worshiping false idols. None of this is rocket science. You can worship one God, any God you want, but if you are worshiping all other gods, you're not worshiping the God of Israel, who says that you shall have no other God before me. You shall not worship false idols. You shall not worship animals or sacrifice. When Jesus came down, it was to stop the sacrificing of animals. And he took the place of our sin and suffered for our sin in a final atonement that was finished and completed on the cross at Calvary. They've got everything planned. There's no doubt about it. These plans are all in place. Certainly the plan for the Great Reset is all in place. They're not destroying all the currencies just for the pure pleasure of it. I know they get pleasure out of it, but that's not the satanic agenda. The satanic agenda is to put everybody globally on a single currency. The BRICS countries are creating their own currency system backed by gold. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Like Nixon is who took us off the gold standard. But I don't foresee this happening, because biblically this is where it's at. The Antichrist is coming, and everybody has to get prepared, because this is coming like a freight train as they're wrecking all of Europe is being deindustrialized. It's going back to the, it's not going to be the Stone Age, it's going to be the feudal system. It's going to go back to being feudal Europe. And they're going to be peasants working away, just like agricultural society. Except they'll be pagan, they'll still have all their pagan, they'll go to Disney World because they're still packing into Disney World. They're not going to give up on American culture because that's brought them all the wonderful child porn and the Roman Polanskis and the Sharon Tate murders and the devil worship that's in Rosemary's Baby and all of Polanski's films that I can think of have the god of carnage and what's the Venus in Furs, the bitter moon, the sixth veil, whatever the Johnny Depp movie was with Satan and burning the books, and he's having intercourse with Natasha Henstridge or whoever Polanski's wife is, Emmanuel Senior. I don't know. It's like the vaguer the memory is, I try to keep it as vague as possible at this point. But all of it is what I grew up with, being indoctrinated into the Kenneth Anger movies in art school. How was I to know that he was a Satanist? How was I to know that these are satanic invocation of my demon brother? Wonder what that's about. Lucifer rising? Oh, there really isn't a devil. I didn't really believe there was a devil. I didn't believe there was a Lucifer. I grew up Catholic. I thought it was all, about pedophilia and lesbianism and sex like the Borgias, which is what it's like. So, not to say that all Catholics are like this, but certainly the papacy has always been like this. They make excuses for it, but they're, it's impossible to not see what's going on in the Vatican now when they're worshiping Pachamama, idols, earth fertility mothers, and the Virgin Mary becomes the great, we all pray to the Virgin Mary. Where is that in the Bible exactly? Do you read about the Virgin Mary and her being a substitute for Jesus, along with all the saints, their bones, worshiping the bones of the saints? That's like worshiping mummies in their burial chambers, or worshiping the deities of the bodies of the Freemasons in Washington, D.C., the body of Albert Pike in his temple of Freemasonry up there on 16th Street, I think. So anyway, God bless everybody. I hope some of you will take seriously what these people are up to in Egypt. I mean, where else is it going to be? That's where the Egyptian religion is. That's where all of the Satanism traces back to. That's where Aleister Crowley comes out of, as the ancient mystery religion of Egypt, and the worship of Isis and Osiris and Horus and Sun Ra, the god of the sun, is the rising sun, not the Son of God, the Son of Man. Remember Manson? He called himself Son of Man. You can see all this. That's how these things are deciphered. God speaks through numerology. He speaks through color. He speaks through names, bloodlines, all of this. It takes a lot of reading, and it takes a lot of reading of Scripture, but it takes matching Scripture up to reality that's around you. It's not happening in some, spirit world up there in heaven. It's happening right here on earth right now, and you can see it manifesting in the activities of these globalist 1% and people above them. Hidden people. There are layers, hidden layers from, but you can see the pronouncements they're making, so that people. I'm really curious about what these universal, and you're worshiping the earth. Where's God in all this? Pope says it's in a leaf or a teardrop or a river stream or a brook. That's known as pantheism, and it comes from Baruch Spinoza, the heretical Jew, incidentally, in Amsterdam. The Jewish community tried to kill him, but that's heretical to the Jewish religion as well. So there are levels of heresy, and this is the ultimate Antichrist appearance with the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem, and the Battle of Armageddon, and the pestilence and war and famine. And I'm going to avoid, because I got banned from saying anything about the pestilence, and it's not my interest or knowledge to talk about pharmaceutical industry, other than to warn people away from any kind of pharmaceutical drugs, to the extent they're on them, to try to break that mind-controlling addiction. And the same thing with any kind of street drugs or pharmaceutical derivatives or combinations thereof. God bless all of you. This is really, these are very terrifying times. And stay close to God.